Good morning. My name is Mark DiBernardo. Welcome to the National Press Club and what we consider to be a very important announcement on a lawsuit that was filed this morning in Denver, Colorado, a challenge to Colorado Amendment 64, the ballot initiative that legalized, quote-unquote, recreational marijuana in the state of Colorado. This lawsuit was filed on behalf of 12 plaintiffs, and I'm privileged to have 4 of those plaintiffs here today. The plaintiffs are 6 sheriffs from Colorado, 4 sheriffs from Nebraska and Kansas, and 2 county attorneys from Nebraska and Kansas. And the basis for their filing is different for the Colorado plaintiffs than it is for the neighboring state plaintiffs. For the Colorado plaintiffs, it's based on an oath of office conflict because they took oaths of office, all of them, to uphold both the U.S. Constitution and the Colorado Constitution. Amendment 64 amends the Colorado Constitution, and so all actions they take in terms of enforcement of marijuana are in conflict between those 2 laws. They have to decide which law they're going to uphold, and every action has a counteraction in terms of a conflicting law. They need direction from the courts which oath of office they are to uphold, which law they're to enforce, and this is a significant dilemma for those Colorado sheriffs. The neighboring state plaintiffs, both the county attorneys and the sheriffs, face a different issue. That issue is diversion of resources. Colorado-sourced marijuana is showing up extensively in neighboring states. In fact, according to HIDA, the high-intensity drug trafficking area, Rocky Mountain HIDA, more than 40 states have seen Colorado-sourced marijuana distributed to those states. The highways that lead north and east to population centers through Nebraska and Kansas are being flooded with Colorado-sourced marijuana. One survey found that 58% of the people that are purchasing marijuana in dispensaries in Denver are from out of state. And so what you have is law enforcement in neighboring states with routine traffic stops, no greater enforcement, just routine traffic stops, seeing Colorado-sourced marijuana in prevalent levels, and drugs that are in greater amounts clearly are intended for distribution, not for personal use, illegal under any circumstance in Nebraska and Kansas, and also the more dangerous forms of marijuana, the marijuana byproducts that are flooding the market in Colorado and out of state, hash oil, the marijuana-infused products like the edibles, cookies, and candy being marketed. It's such a problem for our youth and our children because it's being marketed in what is a deceptive and morally offensive way. In addition, there's wax, the purer form of THC that's being sold, marketed, and distributed in other states as well. So we are basing this lawsuit based on federal preemption, Supremacy Clause, U.S. Constitution. One of the very significant arguments is the fact that the United States has entered into conventions, treaties, and codicils to trade agreements which bind the United States to a policy of enforcing its laws in terms of interdiction of marijuana and other dangerous drugs. The last 2 conventions the United States is party to, they have signatories of 166 and 172 countries. 165 and 171 of those countries have not legalized marijuana at all or in any part of those countries. 1 country has, and that's the United States. They have in 4 states, Colorado at the head of the class. What we've seen in Colorado is a great uptick in terms of marijuana use. Not a good thing. You know, the claim by those who are in favor of legalization say, hey, 21 and older, these are adults, this is adult activity. What you see from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the most recent survey, is that in Colorado, use by high school age students is not much different, only slightly lower, than use by college age students. A huge problem. And in fact, Colorado, again, at the head of the class in terms of the extent of use. And this is for 2013. This is before the dispensaries opened. This is only when, quote unquote, personal use was permitted under Colorado law in Amendment 64. Personal use is really a misnomer because it's more than personal use. It's also cultivation. Individuals can grow 6 plants. 6 healthy plants of marijuana can produce up to 300 joints. There are farming co-ops, very, very common. So you're allowed for each adult per household 6 plants. Very often you have huge grow facilities. And in these huge grow facilities, they say, okay, we're doing it on behalf of others because specifically Amendment 64 allows assistance of others in the things that are made legal. So you have these huge gross facilities. You have transfer of up to an ounce per transaction. You have possession, use, transportation, and it's an untenable situation. The growth has been terrific. The sales have been through the roof. So what you have in Colorado is much higher sales of marijuana than projected. In fact, the first 2 months when Amendment 64 became effective, Colorado was importing marijuana from Arizona and from the West Coast because the demand so far exceeded the supply. Who intended that consequence? Since then, projections for the amount of sales have been far exceeded, and revenues generated in Colorado to the state, one of the canards that justifies legalization, have fallen far short of projections. So you have this irreconcilable situation where they're selling a lot more marijuana than expected and raising a lot less revenue than expected. We think we have a good chance of winning on this. The case for federal preemption is very strong. It's not just a question of the Controlled Substances Act, the conventions that I mentioned, the treaties that we are parties to. The case for federal preemption, very strong. We have a great set of plaintiffs. We have 4 of them here today, and I'm happy to introduce our lead plaintiff, Sheriff Justin Smith from Larimer County, Colorado.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. I would like to first say that I am not here by choice. As a sheriff, I'm here by necessity. You see, as a sheriff, I'm first and foremost a lawman, and one of my primary responsibilities is to defend the rule of law. Amendment 64, when it was passed in Colorado, created a constitutional showdown, and that constitutional showdown was destined for a courtroom from the moment the last ballot was cast in the state. You see, Amendment 64 created a state's right for individuals and anybody within our state to engage in an activity that is clearly in violation of federal law. Further, Amendment 64 requires that the state of Colorado and its subdivisions actively facilitate those violations. That's what brings me here today. You see, in Colorado, every elected official, sheriffs included, are required under the state constitution to take an oath of office. And that oath of office requires that they swear to defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Colorado. Amendment 64 puts a conflict in those 2 parts of the oath of office. You see, many of the acts that were required as a sheriff under Amendment 64 require us to defend the rights of an individual to participate in activity and actually become actively involved in activities that are a violation of federal law. And further, in state constitution and state statute, the mere engaging in those activities actually makes a sheriff ineligible to hold office. And you see, the drafters of Amendment 64 either were unaware of this constitutional showdown they were creating, or they deliberately misled the citizens of Colorado because this was never brought up when people went to the ballot box. The primary point of this suit, from my involvement, is to bring this case where it belongs, in front of a court of law, and get a ruling whether the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution still holds. This is the primary goal from my participation in this suit, and I look forward to this getting before a judge and both sides making their case. I would now like to introduce Yuma County Sheriff Chad Day.
Thank you, Sheriff Smith, and thank you to Mark DiBernardo for taking this on with us, and also to your firm, Jackson Lewis. Like Sheriff Smith said, I'm Chad Day. I'm the sheriff of Yuma County out on the Eastern Plains in Colorado, and I'd like to echo many of the sentiments that Sheriff Smith shared with you. I and my deputies and all law enforcement in Colorado that are subject to the oath to both the Constitution of the United States and the state of Colorado are just in an untenable position. By supporting and upholding one, we're violating the other, and vice versa. So I'm excited to, at the very least, get an answer from the courts, and this is the most appropriate way to do that. While I do believe that there are some in the marijuana industry and marijuana legalization camps that are legitimately trying to follow the rules, trying to follow the law, trying to follow some what I would describe as some chaotic regulations. While those people exist, there isn't any way around the reality that marijuana is still very closely married to the criminal element as well. And that's not just the criminal element that Sheriff Smith mentioned, as far as marijuana still being a Schedule I controlled substance. It's also married to the criminal element just in the associations that we see and witness every day in law enforcement. So this is, despite the fact that exists, the dangers that we in law enforcement see and witness every day, or the perceived benefits that those are in support of Amendment 64 and marijuana legalization, despite all of those things, this is still an action that has the potential, or we should expect to be good for both sides here. This is a question that really needs to be answered. It's most appropriate and beneficial to both law enforcement and the marijuana industry to present this question to the courts for clarification. I do want to add, it's unfortunate that a specific person has to be listed as a defendant in this action. Both Governor Hickenlooper and Colorado's new Attorney General, Cynthia Kaufman, who both have made very clear comments indicating that not only that the passage of Amendment 64 was a bad idea, but that it's not working. Despite that and their responsibilities, we can pursue this action without being offensive to them, without them taking personal offense to this decision to pursue this, or those that are supportive of the industry. Because again, like I said, it's a legitimate question that deserves an answer either way. So it's my hope that those supportive of marijuana legalization can find it within themselves to accept the reality that this question of conflicting constitutions deserves an answer for all of us, and that we can all look forward to an answer and some clarification from the courts. This is also not just a Colorado problem, obviously. This is the most important question for us in Colorado is this conflict of conscience for us with our oaths. But there are also some real costs to certainly the surrounding states, and as Mark mentioned earlier, states around the country. But I'd like to introduce Sheriff Mark Overman from Scottsbluff County in Nebraska, who will share some of the real consequences outside of Colorado as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Day. Amendment 64 has placed an undue burden on the taxpayers in my county and other taxpayers in Nebraska and in many surrounding states. In many cases, we are forced away from some of what we normally do because we are having to deal with Colorado-sourced marijuana. Because of Amendment 64, our jails are full, our court dockets are full. There are increased costs for overtime, for incarceration, for housing prisoners, for providing for their medical expenses, and providing for their representation. Colorado's legalization of marijuana has completely changed the landscape involving the marijuana that we encounter. Almost all of the marijuana that we see, and I'm talking about certainly in my area of Nebraska, but actually across the state from conversations I've had with others, almost all of it originates in Colorado. The potency of the marijuana that we encounter is off the charts. It is the best marijuana in the world. And the price has at least tripled. We're seeing a marked increase in the numbers of children as young as 13 that we are finding in possession of marijuana. We don't want what Colorado has. And in my opinion, the media has focused on the feel-good stories about marijuana, and they have tended to ignore what's really going on the ground out there. We are watching it, and we are watching the statistics. And these are not statistics produced by law enforcement. Marijuana involvement in traffic fatalities has more than doubled since 2007 in Colorado to more than 16%. I get hate mail, I would call it, from the pro-marijuana factions every time I say something. And they say marijuana never killed anybody. Well, if 16% of the fatalities in Colorado involve marijuana, try telling that to those families, that it never killed anybody. Youth marijuana in Colorado, age 12 to 17, 39% higher than the national average. Adult marijuana use in Colorado, 51% higher than the national average. Colorado's seen a 57% increase in emergency room visits related to marijuana. And all hospitalizations related to marijuana are up 91%. Marijuana-related exposures of children aged 0 to 5 has increased 268% since 2010, with Colorado now at triple the national average. And interdiction seizures destined for other states have increased almost 400% since 2008 and have taken place in 40 other states. I hear this from a lot of law enforcement executives in a lot of different states. I've been to the meetings and talked to them. We think that what Colorado has done is illegal. We think it's unconstitutional. I believe, my fellow plaintiffs believe, that this case is going to have national ramifications. And if we win, then we can reverse what is looking like a surrender to the pro-marijuana crowd. I would like to introduce Sheriff Burton Pianalto of Sherman County, Kansas.
I want to apologize for my voice. Excuse me today. I want to apologize for my voice. Thank you, Sheriff Overman. Like Sheriff Smith said, I'm here out of necessity. As a sheriff of Sherman County, I've been elected to protect and serve the citizens of Sherman County. I'm assigned a fixed budget that by the Sherman County Commissioners that allows me to hire and have the number of personnel that I'm equipped with to do my duty. Within these duties fall the management of a 28-bed jail. Colorado source, excuse me, the state of Colorado, by passing Amendment 64, has placed a direct burden on my budget and on the budget of the surrounding counties. Colorado Amendment 64 has resulted in increased drug trafficking in Sherman County. I-70 runs through the center of Sherman County and has become a major thoroughfare that is used by the drug traffickers. They're carrying large, substantial quantities of Colorado-sourced marijuana. And also its marijuana byproducts, the wax, the hash oils, the edibles that come through. There's been also more impaired drivers on the highways and also less law enforcement to deal with that because of the diversion from the normal duties, having to deal with the processing, the arresting, and the incarceration of the suspected drug trafficking of the Colorado-sourced marijuana. I believe that the passage of the Amendment 64 in Colorado has been at the cost of the citizens of Sherman County. Because of our close proximity to Denver supermarket, their dispensaries and grow sites, including with the potencies and the popularity of the Colorado marijuana, my county and our state is becoming the primary avenue for these drug traffickers. I do not want or need any more drug dealers or illegal drugs in my county. We have both of these because of what Colorado's done. As a result, there are more prisoners in my Bastille, my jail, and a higher operational cost sustained for arresting and processing of these, providing the mental health, the medical facilities, and also transporting these prisoners. I would like to make a note about the majority of these increased cases that we're seeing in Sherman County are not a result of interdiction. In other words, we don't go out and seek to find these. These are through normal traffic stops that we are seeing the increase. The alert officer on the traffic stop, like speeding, would observe something and then investigate further, resulting in the large quantities. Regarding whether Constitution or Colorado's Amendment 64 is constitutional or not, I believe it isn't. And regardless of whether the Colorado Amendment 64 is preempted by the Controlled Substance Acts or the corresponding federal laws that should be enforced, or the convention or treaties that are also there or not, I believe it is preempted. The simple and unacceptable reality is that Colorado voters have passed this amendment and is actually taking money out of Sherman County taxpayers' pockets. I believe, like Sheriff Overman said, I believe that we have a strong case in winning this. I believe it's a great opportunity to reverse that surrender that we've seen of just allowing legalization of marijuana, and to step back and to really look at what is going on and how we can address it and regulate it properly. We need the courts to answer into that. How do we deal with it? I believe that we are at a crossroad on the marijuana legalization. And where we go from here is going to be a profound effect on the American society.
Thank you, Sheriff Pianelto. I'll ask the sheriffs to come up and stand up here by the podium. I do want to make underscore something that Sheriff Chad Day said, which was that I do want to praise Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado, Attorney General Cynthia Kaufman, and former Attorney General John Suthers. All of them have been vocal opponents of Amendment 64. All of them have been opposed to legalization of marijuana. We find ourselves, Jackson Lewis, in a unique situation that we have a case that is captioned Sheriff Justin Smith, Sheriff Chad Day, and others, our 12 plaintiffs, v. John Hickenlooper, Governor of Colorado. And we have a defendant who essentially has expressed views in support of our position. That's a very unique situation to be in. Governor Hickenlooper has referred to Amendment 64 as risky, reckless, a bad idea. He's urged other governors at the National Governors Association to go slow, not adopt it. It's an experiment. Let's see how it plays out. The day after the election, November 7th, 2012, he said if he had a magic wand, he would wave that wand and make it go away, Amendment 64. And now what we've seen with this experience is great underreporting in terms of the sales, great underpayment of taxes, the revenues that are raised falling far short of expectations. We've seen the criminal element. The auditor of the state of Colorado has mentioned that many of the people involved in the legal marijuana trade in Colorado are the same people who were involved in the illegal trade of marijuana prior to that time. We've seen great abuses in terms of distribution of marijuana and more dangerous marijuana byproducts to youths So at Children's Hospital in Denver, there are 7 times as many emergency room visits for children aged 5 and under from marijuana overdoses since Amendment 64 was enacted. This is a tragedy. Greeley Elementary School in Greeley, Colorado, you had 3 students in the 4th grade dealing marijuana, 4th grade. They said, hey, it's legal. My parents use it. We have it at home. What kind of message is going out there? So I don't normally quote Governor Jerry Brown of California, but Jerry Brown said, essentially he said, how can we compete in a global economy when we have stoned employees and stoned students? You know, this is not a good thing. What Colorado Amendment 64 means is that, as referred to earlier, and Sheriff Overman has some statistics I think that are very alarming. We're familiar with these statistics in terms of the extent of increased marijuana use in Colorado. This is undermining education in our schools. It's undermining performance and safety in our workplaces. It's undermining safety on our highways. You know, all of these numbers, all of these indications, very alarming, very threatening, and it's going in the wrong direction, and it's getting worse. It's getting worse. Colorado is zoomed up to be the state with the 3rd highest rate of marijuana use, current marijuana users in the United States, and that's as of the end of 2013, the year in which personal use was permitted, but before the dispensaries opened. And now we have over 700 dispensaries and growth facilities that are open to the public and increasing all the time. So I do want to praise, we are in this unique situation. I want to praise Governor Hickenlooper, our defendant that we're suing. Unfortunate situation, but that's the way it has to work. I do agree with him. I agree with Attorney General Cynthia Kaufman, who said that it's just not worth it. 2 weeks ago, she told the National Attorneys General Association meeting, it's not worth it. She advised other states not to do it. She opposed legalization. She opposed Amendment 64. She said it's not working how it was projected, and it's not what was sold. It was sold as, hey, we're going to raise money for schools. First $40 million goes to school construction and maintenance. The revenues that are raised out of this. That's not how it's worked. The greatest concern that I have, and I think my colleagues have, and our plaintiffs have, is the exposure of youth to this drug, because it's just not controlled. It's poisoning our young people. And when you look at the statistics in Colorado, that high school age kids are using marijuana, you know, it's increasing 40, 50%, and they're using it at rates that are equivalent to that of college age students, then it's very, very alarming. So other comments that anybody wants to add at this point? Any of our plaintiffs want to add any comments?
We'll certainly take any questions, Sue.
Two questions. One, who's financing the legal fight? And also, I'm wondering if there's any concern from the sheriffs that this might backfire with polls showing the majority of Americans support legalization, and with the fact that Congress recently banned the Justice Department from going after medical marijuana states. Are you concerned at all about that?
Sure. First question that was asked is who is backing this? We have a significant ally and someone who's provided assistance and support, the Drug Free America Foundation, and certainly that's one of our allies in this. But you know, there's many concerned American citizens about this. There's many people that are concerned about what's happening in their communities and what the trend and the tide is. And certainly my law firm is committed, I'll say this, Jackson Lewis, because we know that what is happening in our educational system with it being undermined by stoned students, what we don't need is more stoned students. You know, that's not a good thing. This is the pool of potential employees that are coming to the workplace. In Colorado, it's nearly 1/3 and rising of those people 18 to 25 who are current marijuana users. It's about 30%. It's rising significantly, and this was before the dispensaries opened. So, you know, you have 1/3 of this pool of new employees coming into the workplace who are regular marijuana users. Not a good thing. And of course, the compromise in the workplace, very significant. According to HHS, those who engage in illicit drug use are 1/3 less productive. So no wonder Jerry Brown is saying, you know, how can we compete? No wonder the government officials in Colorado are opposed to this. You know, what employer says, please, come one, come all, we want to hire druggies. We want to hire people who are engaged in illicit drug use. And what marijuana, you don't see ads in the paper on monster.com. This is marijuana users welcome, or we give advantage to marijuana users. So that's the terms of who's backing. Second question is concerned about backfiring. You know, the legitimacy of marijuana has been established with a great deal of disinformation and misinformation. Step one was the medical marijuana effort, which somehow has resonated in public's minds, saying that marijuana has legitimate purposes in terms of medicine, is a medicine for which there are not alternatives. It is not a legitimate medicine, and I know this because the Food and Drug Administration, in numerous administrations, has repeatedly said that smoked marijuana has no legitimate medical purpose. And they've also said that there are numerous alternatives available that are regulated and are approved by the FDA. So, but it's a two-step process. What happens is you legitimize marijuana by saying it has legitimate purposes, that it's a medicine, that it's therapeutic, and then you take one step from there. I think in many respects, as I referenced earlier, it was a canard to say that, you know, this is going to be a revenue generator. The cost to the state is much greater than the revenues generated to the state. It hasn't helped the schools, it's hurting the schools, but, you know, that's the idea. We're going to raise money on taxes and build more schools and hire more teachers. It's simply not the case. And, you know, I think that, you know, the percentages in the polls can be misleading, but you are right. By and large, most polls are showing that by a slim majority, the American public supports this. I will say this, it's a terrific job by the legalizer lobby. They are highly incentivized. This is projected to be a more than $1 billion a year industry in Colorado alone. They have the money, they have the incentive, they are well organized, they got their message out. Their messages, I think, are largely misleading. But in the state of Washington, where a similar initiative was passed, $6.9 million was spent by the pro-legalization advocates. $63,000 was spent by the opponents. So if you have $6.9 million spent on one side of the issue and $63,000 on the other, and it very narrowly passed, then I think that campaign was dispositive in terms of the outcome. Let me ask the sheriff, do you want to respond as well?
Just to make sure I'm clear, would you repeat the second question about backfire again? I just want to make sure that I get all of it.
Sure. Say you win the court ruling in your favor. I mean, are you perhaps inspiring Congress to act to allow states to do what they want? Is that a concern for you?
Okay, all right. I know that Sheriff Smith wants to respond as well, but my immediate response to you is that no, I'm not concerned, and the reason is that's not the question that's before us. The question is, what are we dealing with right now? And if we go back to the original comments that specifically both Sheriff Smith and I addressed about a conflict between the two constitutions, that's the question that's before us right now. Whether this results in some other action down the road or not, we'll deal with that appropriately when the time comes. But that's certainly not something that I'm worried about. I think that this is an issue that again, I think inspires an awful lot of emotion from quite a few people, and we, as law enforcement officers, have a duty, in my opinion, to back away from what emotion might be there, and try and make a well thought out decision about what our responsibility is. So that's the position that I take on this, and one that I would encourage not just other law enforcement officials or those that are supportive of this action, but also those that are frustrated by it as well. Those that enjoy what Colorado has done. To be able to step back from that emotion and just say, you know what, there is a legitimate question in front of us right now, and it is most appropriate for the courts to give us some clarification. So with that, I'll step back and let Sheriff Smith address it as well.
Thank you. And a very solid question, one certainly that I have pondered prior to taking action. And to me, it comes down to something as simple as this. We're a constitutional republic where the ballot box is balanced with judicial review. And so, as Sheriff Day mentioned, the question from Colorado sheriffs is simply that, is to take a ballot initiative through the state constitution, have it run through the courts to determine the constitutionality. As far as where it goes from here, you know, we leave that up to the process of the voters and Congress. However, it's important to keep in mind that no matter what the answer is, it has to meet the constitutional standard. As sheriffs, it's our obligation to assure that the things that go on in our states meet those standards. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Burton.
You asked about elections, impacting our elections, correct? Is that, when you re-asked that question?
Right, so I mean, the issue is that it is in violation of federal law, and federal law could presumably be changed if there's enough will to do it. I'm wondering if lawsuit and a victory would force a change.
Okay, well, I thought you had asked something about affecting my election. I mean, I'm actually coming up in election for a year, and in 2 years I'll be up for election. I thought about that long and hard, about whether to join this lawsuit or not. Anytime I speak out about this, like Sheriff Overman said, I get a lot of hate mail. And my staff accepts that hate mail also. They accept the phone calls and everything else. As I left, I apologized to them because I know it's going to cause a lot of more hate mail coming in. But my duty is to the citizens of Sherman County. I have to protect and serve them. And to serve them, I have to look at what it's causing. When I have a diversion of funds because of the Colorado source marijuana, I'm having to choose between repairing vehicles, my patrol vehicles, and going over budget. My budget is fixed. I cannot go over that budget. And if I go over that budget, it's very detrimental to my office. Okay, the county commissioners don't like that. So basically, I have to look at why am I having to choose between having safe vehicles for my patrol officers and dealing with this problem of dealing. Also, I'd like to make a note that the amounts that we're getting off the interstate aren't legal even in Colorado for the people to possess. I mean, these are large quantities. It's not small personal use. This, if you had in Colorado, you could actually be arrested for it because it's increased. I'm not sure laws of Colorado laws. That's not my job. So, thank you.
You know, all of us up here are law enforcement officers, career professionals, and we have great respect for the rule of law. And the law in Nebraska is that marijuana is illegal. The law in the United States is that marijuana is illegal. I want to address one part of your question was that you implied that Congress has somehow directed that the states aren't to be bothered on their legalization of marijuana. I don't think Congress has ever voted on that. Medical marijuana. I think that's more of an administration policy, and we agree with it. I have great respect for the rule of law. If the law changes, we will follow the law, whatever it may be. We don't make the laws, we enforce the laws. We all take an oath to do so, and we take that very seriously.
Question for Sheriff Smith. In Larimer County, Amendment 64 won by about 16,000 votes. It's about the same margin as the statewide results. So, you know, you talked about your duty to the citizens of your county and the conflict between state law and federal law. It would seem like the folks in Larimer County support state law. And as a state law enforcement official, have you considered any efforts to advocate for changing federal law? Have you talked to, I know Congressman Polis is the congressman in your district. He has a bill to regulate marijuana like alcohol. Have you supported those efforts or considered changing federal law rather than state law?
Good question. Where I'm at really isn't the issue of the wisdom of the policy. There's many laws out there that I don't like, that are constitutional, and we abide by those. For me, at this point, it's merely that issue of the constitutionality of how this has occurred. It really isn't about a popularity contest. What's interesting, though, was 1 year prior to the passage of Amendment 64 in the city of Fort Collins, which is the county seat in my county, they actually defeated a measure to allow medical marijuana within the city limits to be sold. So it's actually gone back and forth. Only a few years ago, in 2006, Amendment 44 was defeated by about a 60 to 40. But it comes down to me of not being a popularity contest. As a sheriff, I've really made the point to strive to simply do the right thing. And for me, the right thing is to defend the Constitution. That's the primary part of my oath of office, and it's to carry out the duties. So where it goes from here, I will leave that up to the legislative process. But for right now, I feel an absolute obligation to defend our Constitution. And I believe we are wrapped up on time. Do you want to make some closing remarks, Mark?
You know, we truly are at a crossroads on this issue in our country. How the court decides this, and there are other suits that have been filed as well. There's room at the table for all of these suits. I praise the other plaintiffs that have taken action. They have different suits with different bases for standing, different sets of plaintiffs. In some cases, different legal arguments. You know, we like our case. We like our plaintiffs. We're 800, Jackson Lewis is 800 lawyer law firm. Boy, I like our case. I like the legal precedents, and I particularly like and respect and thank our plaintiffs for joining in on this, because it's incredibly important to our country. We are at a crossroads. How the court decides this decision is going to have a profound effect on American society. You know, Sheriff Day and Sheriff Smith, they just want an answer. You know, how should we perform in our jobs? What is our responsibility? What is the law? And I think getting clarification from the courts is going to be in everybody's interest, all parties' interest. Thank you very much for coming. We'll be here later if you have any other questions you want to ask. Good morning.